Welcome. Is the mic on yet? Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Evanston. My name is Eileen. I'm the senior minister here. Whether this is your spiritual home or you are newly discovering this community, we are so grateful that you are with us this morning. We are an inclusive and welcoming community seeking truth in love and striving to nurture the human spirit for a world made whole. We are guided by our principles and values, which remind us in every moment and through every challenge that each of us is worthy of love and that we are all connected through the vast and beautiful web of existence. We come together to remember our kinship with one another, to hold one another in heart and mind with tenderness and with careful attention. If you're joining us online, good morning, welcome. There are many links of connection in the description below the YouTube live stream, including the order of service credits, ways to support our mission, and how to join our email newsletter list. And if you're here in the sanctuary, welcome. We encourage you to use the QR code, which for the digital order of service, which is should be up on the screen and also on a little placard in the lobby, along with large print orders of service. And our hymnals are right outside the sanctuary door. We also have an inductive loop system for anyone wearing a hearing aid that is equipped with a T-coil. Your hearing aid should automatically connect if you enable the T-coil feature. For those who do not have a T-coil enabled hearing aid, we have receivers that can pick up the loop signal and you can listen through earphones. They are also located on the table just before you enter the sanctuary. A few announcements. The Anti-Oppression Task Force invites everyone to attend a summit here this coming Saturday, January 21st. We will have in-person and virtual options from 9 to noon, and then a lunch in the sanctuary from 12 to 1. Jean Durkin will be in the cafe area after the service during kinship time to give more information or answer questions. We hope everyone will attend. There's a registration link in the newsletter. The annual Interfaith Martin Luther King Jr. service is today at 3 p.m. at Faith Temple Church of God in Christ on Dewey. Join us to celebrate our shared commitment to reparations, reconciliation, and repair, and to hear the combined results of our fundraising efforts thus far across faith communities. And I'm going to take this opportunity to share the good news that with your efforts among this congregation to contribute to the Evanston Reparations Community Fund, we have been able to give $52,000. You clapped before I could give you the full amount, $52,760. Congratulations and thank you to all of you who took part. I hope this inspires further giving. And again, today we'll hear the total number raised by the interfaith community. Tomorrow, join the UCE team in the Interfaith Action Walk for Warmth to raise money to provide food and shelter to those in need. Renee Gatsis will be at the back tables during kinship time to help folks register. It's not too late. I'll be walking, so I hope to see you there. Finally, Javoid Simmons, whose art graces our lobby, will be here to discuss his work this Friday, January 20th, from 6 to 7:30. Please join us. And now let us settle into our shared time of reflection, celebration, and inspiration. As we begin our worship service, those joining us online are invited to gather your chalice as we join in beloved community. Welcome to worship.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
This morning, we are introducing a combined Indigenous land acknowledgement and Black labor acknowledgement that will be part of our worship service each week as a responsive reading. A few months ago, within a day or two, I was separately contacted by Nyanda Julo and Renee Gatsis to talk about creating a Black labor acknowledgement for our congregation. Since then, some of you have emailed me copies and examples of other Black labor acknowledgements from theater companies and other nonprofits. A Black labor acknowledgement is a statement that recognizes that much of the economic progress and development in our country resulted from the unpaid labor and forced servitude of enslaved African people and their descendants. Our Black labor acknowledgement is one step in building solidarity with communities disproportionately affected by the generational impacts of chattel slavery and its modern successors, systemic poverty, voting rights violations, and mass incarceration, to name just a few. In the coming months, our Team 8th principal will be writing a long-form Black labor acknowledgement, which will be added to our website and posted in the lobby. If you'd like to be a part of that process, please contact Reverend Susan. Like our land acknowledgement, our Black labor acknowledgement is a living statement that will evolve, and we evolve, in our knowledge and community relationships. Nyanda was going to read the statement for the first time with us today, but she wasn't able to be here. She's with us in spirit for sure as we read this new combined land and labor acknowledgement. You will be invited to speak the last sentence together, and the words will appear on the screen. I want to give thanks to Reverend Susan for crafting this in partnership with several of our Black members and members of the racial justice and Native community solidarity teams. Our land and labor acknowledgements tell the story of place, a story that continues with how we choose to move through our lives. The Unitarian Church of Evanston resides on the traditional homelands of the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi peoples, land that was recorded as being transferred from the local Potawatomi community to the U.S. government in 1829, before the Potawatomi were forcefully removed west of the Mississippi River. This land was then sold to white settlers. We remember the hands and bodies of the Black people who built up our country's culture and economy, a role forced on them originally by enslavement. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice since 1619, acknowledging the tremors of violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be witnessed today. These acknowledgements are one small effort toward building long-term solidarity with contemporary communities. We commit ourselves to take what we learn here today and incorporate it into our lives and turn our thoughts into actions. To learn more about our congregation's land and labor acknowledgements, please visit our website. And please join me in saying, we name these realities with honor for all the ancestors, respect for our descendants, and gratitude for the land we use as sacred space. Thank you. Margaret, you come up. Yeah, your turn. She's going to read, yes.
We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold the whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly towards our highest ideals. What's next?
Who all look great from here. The choir looks a little weird from here. The chalice lighting was done by the Anti-Oppression Task Force, the group that's putting together the session next Saturday, which we hope you all will be able to attend. Please rise, embody your spirit, and join in saying the words of our covenant, which are up on the screen. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Before we sing our opening hymn, and while you're still standing, let's turn to one another briefly and say good morning. For those of you participating from home, please greet one another in the chat. Oh, well.
They can still hear you on the microphone.
Okay. For those of you in the... Never mind. I'm going to get... I know it's hardly enough time to even say goodbye, say hello to one person, let alone everyone near you. Please stay after the service, stay risen. Please stay after the service and continue the conversations with people you don't know very well, and let's keep building kinship among us. Please remain uplifted as we sing hymn number 151, I Wish I Knew How.
There. I'm tall, but not that tall. All right, good morning, everyone. Today's Time for All Ages is from a book called I Am Human, a Book of Empathy by Susan Verde and illustrated by Peter H. Reynolds. It's coming. Drum roll, please. There it is. I was born, a miracle, one of billions, but unique. I am human. I am always learning. I'm finding my way and choosing my path on this incredible journey. I have big dreams. I see possibility. I have endless curiosity. I make discoveries. I have a feeling of wonder. I am amazed by nature. I have a playful side. I find joy in friendships. I am human. But being human means I am not perfect. I make mistakes. I can hurt others with my words, my actions, and even my silence. I can be hurt too. I can be fearful of things I don't yet understand and timid to try something new. I have a heavy heart when I feel sadness. I am human. But then I remind myself that because I am human, I can make choices. I can move forward. A poor choice can become a better choice with thoughtfulness. A bad day can become a better day with kindness. I can act with compassion and lend a helping hand. I can treat others with equality and be fair. I can choose not to fight, but instead to listen and find common ground. I can say, I'm sorry, and ask for forgiveness. I am human. One of billions, but unique. I am not alone. I'm connected to my friends, to my family, to the world. We are all humans together. And I will keep trying to be the best version of me. I am full of hope. I am human.
I invite us to settle now into a time of quiet reflection as we share the joys and sorrows of this community. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you'd like read aloud, you can email me. You can fill out the Google form found on the homepage of our website, or you can write it in this book, which is found at the table back there. We listen to these offerings with tenderness and with respect. So let us quiet our bodies and our voices at this, and our minds at this sacred time by breathing in together and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. These are the joys and the sorrows that have been shared for today. Kristen Lems wrote, she's thrilled to commemorate Martin Luther King today, tomorrow, and beyond. I saw him speak in this building, she says, and we'll never forget it. And from Melanie Kitchener, David Lewis Kitchener turns 40 today. I believe that's your son. Yes, congratulations, Mama. Oh my goodness. And a joy from Barbara Young, who shared with me she's very grateful for the many Christmas cards she received from UCE members, too many to name or to respond to individually. Please know how much it meant to her to have those cards brighten her mantle this season. From Chris Yu, she writes, my joy today is that of community. I was signed up to deliver lunches for Connections for the Homeless this Friday, but I came down with COVID. I reached out to Sheila Holder and Maggie Weiss from the Food and Shelter team to see if they could do it for me, and they jumped in right away, feeling thankful for this community and that the COVID is getting better. From Harry Hirsch, Saturday, January 14th marked the 8th anniversary of the death of his beloved, joyful, playful, wonderful wife, Libby Sohn Hirsch. A sorrow for her loss, a joy for the almost 35 years we spent together. And I share this sorrow for the people of Selma, Alabama, as they recover from the devastating loss of the tornado that struck there. There's a relief fund through the Living Legacy Project. If you're interested in contributing there, we can put information about that in the newsletter. Barbara Mesley's sister, Nancy, will have breast cancer surgery Thursday in Charlottesville, Virginia. Nancy's cancer was diagnosed early, but it is aggressive, so she'll have a tough year ahead of chemo and radiation. Bob and Barbara appreciate your love and concern for their precious sis. And finally, Allie Hunter shares the deep sorrow that her dear brother, Andy Hunter, died this week by suicide. He was wildly creative, smart, and funny, and he will be so very missed. If you or anyone that you know is struggling, please call 988 for the 24-hour hotline, and our hearts and our love are with you, Allie. She's in Santa Fe right now with her family. With gratitude for this sacred space, for our tender offerings, together we expand our celebrations and we lessen the burden of our grief. You are invited now to come forward and light a candle for the joys and the sorrows that are on your heart. And if you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand. Let us say together, for these joys we give our thanks, for these sorrows we give our love. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, source of love, fire of commitment, and beautiful mystery. We come to the altar of beloved community to lay our deep sorrows and burdens down, to bear witness and allow our pain to be witnessed by those of mutual care, to remember that we are not alone. Each of us knows grief and struggle in our own ways. May the losses that we feel empower our hearts and build our capacity for greater compassion. May we continue to lean into the call of a wider love and to respond with presence. Guide us to greater honesty about who we are and what we are capable of. Help us to face with courage the truth about the times we have fallen short of our highest ideals. May courage and honesty and the source of love motivate us to continue striving, holding ourselves and one another in the infinite and boundless circle of love to which we all belong. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. As we sing our response, our young people, kindergarten through 6th grade, are invited to head to their faith formation time with their adult leaders. The song response is number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
As we say in our covenant each Sunday, service is our law. UCE is called by our mission, values, and principles to contribute to our community, to form accountable partnerships, and to express gratitude through giving. Today's offering will be shared with Midwest Access Coalition, providing access to safe, free, and legal abortions to all people, wherever they live. The fund assists with travel coordination and costs, lodging, food, medicine, and childcare. You may text to give, mail in a check, or give from the website. If you write a check, please note on the memo line that the check is for the shared offering or some other giving. The ushers will now come forward and pass the collection bowls down the rows. Please give as generously as you are able, and may what you give bring you joy.
Lovely. Thank you for your generosity. Our reading today is from Incantations for Rest by Atina O'Danner, who is an Evanston poet and a member of Black Unitarian Universalists in our area. The title of the poem is called Mending. If you are feeling worn thin and riddled with holes, I hope you will take comfort in the fact that much can be mended. Mending comes in many forms, and be aware, mending won't make a thing new. You will be the same as what makes you, you, yourself patched up, pulled together, and swiftly sewn. If you've got time for darning, it is work, work, work. Tedious as meditation, and sometimes as rewarding. Just do what you have time for. My fabric has a lot of holes. I'm grateful for the stars I can see through them, the sunlight warming my blood. I mend some, I leave some, mend some, leave some, patching in remnants of steel wire and my own voice. You deserve. It will be okay. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep sewing. Truth holds together, and I wear the truth I've told. When places in life tear and wear thin, examine the frayed edges and threadbare patches. And if they tear, appreciate the light coming in as you learn how best to mend.
We refuse to let hatred in.
Thank you. Thank you. This morning's reflections are the culmination of many hours spent in our archives exploring our congregation's history as it pertains to racial justice. We did this in part as a way to fulfill our commitment to our interfaith community made this June to support reparations, not only with our dollars, but with our dedication to ongoing learning about harm done, to truth-telling about our own part in the systemic injustices of our community and country, and to build relationships of healing and repair. History does repeat itself if not studied. And I believe it can also repeat itself if we do not commit to deepening our relationships of accountability. Learning our shared stories and sharing them with others who have been impacted by our role or by our absence or complicity is a powerful way to create a path forward toward new ways of being. As we listen to these stories, let us consider what we are called to do moving forward. I'm deeply grateful to Deane, Margaret Shaklee, Jane Kenamore, and Lee Bannor for your time spent learning these stories and sharing them.
So I call my piece of this our lack of involvement. We like to think the North was different, Evanston was different, our church was different, but that's not always what we found in our archives. In 1891, a small group.
A little closer, just because you're
Oh,
having a
okay.
hard time hearing you.
In 1891, a small group formed, and that's what became eventually our congregation, the Unitarian Church of Evanston. That same year, Evanston Hospital was formed, and its founding documents barred black patients. St. Francis also refused services to blacks. In fact, by that time, segregation in Evanston was well established. Most hotels, restaurants did not serve blacks. Even the beaches were segregated with tokens required for the white beaches, and those tokens were denied to our black residents. Even integrated settings had Jim Crow seating, which was the norm on streetcars, in theaters, and in churches in Evanston. This segregation continued for decades. In fact, in 1954, the city of Evanston was host to the World Council of Churches. Our Reverend Homer Jack, the records show, was concerned that black attendees, this was a World Council of Churches, would have no place to stay and few places to dine in the city of Evanston. In 1904, the city of Evanston even proposed a separate town for Negroes, not Evanston. The Evanston YMCA, which is now the McGaw YMCA, was established in 1885 and barred black members, implicitly at the time it opened, but explicitly in 1907 in response to a request by a black minister, Reverend Talley. During those years, the Evanston Y hosted at least one minstrel show. Apparently that was not unusual at the time or for years after. Excuse my language, but a big coon show was produced at Ravinia in 1912. Oakton School had a minstrel show in 1921, and as recently as 1963, Northwestern produced a minstrel spoof of Congress. In response to the decision by the Evanston Y to deny admission to blacks, funding was pursued to establish a black Y, and the Emerson Y was dedicated in 1914. That same year, black doctors Arthur Butler and Isabella Garnett opened the Evanston Sanitarium, which evolved to the community hospital. Rather than fight for integration of the existing hospitals, according to our archives, our congregation, along with other white Evanston churches, periodically donated to all the hospitals, including, as our records state, the Evanston Sanitarium Colored. Our Women's Alliance sewed garnets to donate to the sanitarium. However, by 1924, the nearest full-service hospital for black residents of Evanston was Cook County Hospital. Over the next 25 years, efforts were made to integrate the Evanston hospitals and the Grove Street Y, but our name is not among those promoting those efforts. Finally, in 1948, the UCE Social Justice Committee circulated petitions seeking support for desegregating Evanston Hospital. Our minister at the time, Homer Jack, found himself conflicted about continuing to support construction of a new community hospital for blacks when he believed Evanston and St. Francis Hospital were just on the verge of desegregating. But he was wrong. That took several more years. Desegregation of these Evanston institutions began in 1954, the year Brown versus Board of Education was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. However, our church records show no action on integration efforts until 1961. That year, our Civil Liberties Committee sent letters in support of integration at the Y, which finally integrated in 1963. 1963, let that sink in Evanston. That same year, our Committee on Human Relationships assessed hospital care at Evanston's 3 hospitals, Evanston, St. Francis, and Community Hospital, the Negro Hospital. And although Negro physicians could only practice at Community Hospital, Evanston's black patients could go to any of the 3 hospitals at that time and were seen by our church to receive adequate medical care. However, since patients tend to go where their physicians can treat them, this resulted in de facto segregation and lack of specialty care for our black residents. Apparently, separate but equal was still okay for the Unitarian Church of Evanston.
UCE sat up and took notice when the Reverend Dr. Homer Jack came to town and to our pulpit in 1948. In the 5 years before that, Dr. Jack had developed an open housing program in Chicago. He came to UCE precisely because Evanston seemed ready to move toward racial justice through open housing. And he wanted the church to take the lead in a principled stand against racism. He believed that racial justice in Evanston would begin with integrating the neighborhoods, and that would depend on fair housing opportunities. A bit of history. By the time that Evanston began to seriously work on open housing, a half-century of neighborhood apartheid had woven segregation deep into the fabric of Evanston neighborhood life. In the 1910 census, Evanston's neighborhoods were integrated. But by 1919, a rising concern about the violence in black communities in Chicago led Evanston to establish zoning codes to contain the black population. A vibrant black neighborhood around Maple Street and Davis was zoned for business only, a beginning of what became Evanston's downtown. The houses of folks who lived there were moved west of the city into what became the 5th Ward. Zoning was followed in quick succession by redlining and housing covenants. And Evanston continued unremittent discrimination for 30 years, although not unchallenged. In 1947, they went even further. Emboldened by the Blighting Areas Redevelopment Act of State of Illinois, real estate developers staged an aggressive slum clearance, targeting homes and businesses owned by black folks for demolition. The City Council passed the Land Clearance Commission, which codified this practice. The clearances of 1947 finally sparked a massive response from the black community, protesting that their property was taken with no redress or aid to relocate. Activists in the Evanston community, including those from the faith communities, heard the outrage of the black residents and petitioned the City Council to establish a fair housing ordinance outlawing slum clearance, covenant contracts, and redlining. So in 1948, the City Council passed its first fair housing ordinance and established the Citizen Housing Committee to oversee the behavior of realtors and lenders. The UCE Social Action Committee began working with that committee, along with social justice groups of other Evanston churches. They attended city council meetings. They tracked realtors and collected data for the city campaign against redlining. That committee stayed active on open housing until the mid-'80s. In 1950, in a bold move toward taking a public stand, UCE's Adult Education Committee staged a panel discussion among city leaders, Building for the Future, a housing program for Evanston. They proposed that in its housing and planning programs, Evanston must not segregate or discriminate against racial, religious, or ethnic minorities. Dr. Jack wanted UCE as a church to lead the open housing effort. As the strong institution of Evanston he thought we were. He brought resolutions to the annual meetings several times, but could not persuade the church to take a public stand. When he resigned in 1958 to move on to the United Nations, he expressed regret that UCE could not take a bolder stand. The Reverend Charles Edis came to UCE in 1968, having worked from his pulpit in Montreal for open housing there. He was attracted to the campaign in Evanston and found an ally in Pastor Jacob Blake of Ebenezer AME Church. The two ministers began leading their churchgoers in marches through Evanston for open housing, in support of yet another open housing ordinance. Reverend Edis did not ask the UCE board for permission. They approved his doing what was personally important to him, and if folks followed, well, that was on them. In fact, one spring Sunday morning in 1968, after delivering what he maintained was his only sermon about fair housing in Evanston, Reverend Edis abruptly stepped out of the pulpit, walked down the aisle toward the door, saying, "I'm going to fight for fair housing now. Are you with me?" The congregation sat puzzled for a minute. Then folks gradually got up and followed him out the door and down the street to the mayor's house. And they marched again and again with Reverend Edis over the next few weeks. And still the congregation could not endorse a public statement. When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in May of 1968, the city of Chicago immediately erupted in violence, fire, and mob action. The Evanston city followers were afraid that such action would come up in Evanston, and they appealed to the Reverends Edis and Blake to hold a rally in Fountain Square with prayers and singing to give folks a way to express their anger and grief that might call out their best church behavior. The ministers bargained that if they held the rally, the city council would pass the housing ordinance on their docket. The city agreed. The rally was held several thousand people strong. Nobody rioted, and the city council met that next Monday and passed the ordinance. And still, the UCE congregation could not agree to take a public stand.
Evanston schools were not segregated through any city ordinance, but because Black residents were mostly restricted to housing in the 5th Ward, Evanston, of course, had de facto segregation. Black students were encouraged to attend Foster Elementary School, which between 1930 and 1966 was nearly 100% Black. If the students tested above a certain level, they were sometimes allowed to attend other predominantly white schools. And of course, white students did not have to test to attend those same schools. The district did not hire Black teachers until a protest pretty much forced them to do so in the 1940s. But the few Black teachers that they hired were assigned only to Foster School. Our former mayor, Lorraine Morton finally broke the color line in 1957 when she became the very first black instructor to teach in a predominantly white school, Nichols Middle School. It wasn't until 1966, 12 years after Brown versus the Board of Education, that Evanston adopted a formal desegregation plan. The school board hired Gregory Coffin as the superintendent to implement the plan. Foster became a magnet school, King Lab, and was integrated with 25% black students and the rest white or other races. Black students who did not get into Foster were bused to predominantly white schools, and Coffin made an attempt to make this work by hiring more black teachers for those schools and encouraging a culturally responsive curriculum to support the program. There were, of course, problems with the desegregation plan, particularly concerning the lunch program. The schools at the time had no cafeterias, and white students walked home for lunch. Well, black students couldn't do that, so they had to bring sandwiches and eat in a segregated space in the school. The district developed a plan to work around the issue, and the program seemed to be progressing satisfactorily. In 1969, however, the board voted to fire Coffin, and Coffin was interviewed in the 90s, and he said at the time that it was because he was moving too fast for the district. Some of the community, some of the white community, supported Coffin in 1969 when he was fired, and nearly all the black community did. There were demonstrations in support of Coffin, and these demonstrations ultimately led to a boycott of the schools in April of '69. And freedom schools were established at 5 locations in Evanston in response to that boycott. UCE provided space for one of those schools, which lasted just until the end of that school year. In 1979, Evanston moved King Lab out of Foster and subsequently sold the building to Family Focus. At the time, several leaders of the black community pushed for Foster to be reverted to an attendance area school, but it was not done. After more than 40 years, the district is planning now to build such a school in the 5th Ward, and it's scheduled to be completed in 2025, though there remains controversy over the fate of the Fleetwood Jourdain Community Center that may be demolished to make room for that school. Moving on to high school, Evanston Township High School was not segregated. However, according to oral history interviews and other sources, black students could not swim in the pool, they could not join certain clubs, and they could not attend proms that were normally held at segregated country clubs. Most of all, though, they suffered from low expectations. They were discouraged from taking advanced classes, and chances of attending college were slim. Northwestern was not immune to racism either. Until 1964, and this is documented, Northwestern had a quota system. When applications came in, they were coded white, 1 for white Protestant, 2 for white Catholic, 3 for Jewish, and 4 for black. These strict quotas ruled the last 2 categories particularly. Until 1947, when a lawsuit forced the issue, the few black students who were admitted to Northwestern could not live on campus. If they were lucky, the men found space at the Emerson Street Y, which had, I think, 8 rooms available. But women students at Northwestern were forced to find other housing in the community, which was a daunting task. In summary, discrimination in education began in kindergarten and extended through the university level in Evanston. We don't have a record in our archives of UCE's leadership or participation in protests against the segregation or integration plans, other than providing a site for that short-lived Freedom School back in the spring of 1969.
What should our role be? What should our role be? This question has vexed this congregation for decades. Shortly after we moved into this building in 1958, the following resolution was presented at a congregational meeting. Resolved that the Unitarian Church of Evanston endorses the principle that all persons, regardless of race, creed, or national origin, shall have equal access to all available housing, and the Unitarian Church of Evanston urges the formation of a local Human Relations Commission and the use of legislation to further fair housing practices. This resolution failed at a congregational meeting. Reasons given: the church should not take stands. That's not what church is about. A church should not support legislation because such action would violate our nonprofit status. Now, throughout the 1950s, our minister, Homer Jack, was a longtime civil rights activist. In fact, around that time, he preached a sermon titled "Putting Christ Back into the Young Men's Christian Association." It might surprise you for a Unitarian minister's topic. But what he was doing is he was taking the YMCA to task for the fact that there were two in Evanston, one black, one white, and as you can imagine, they were separate but not equal. The church established a civil liberties committee to support desegregation of the YMCA, but still, it could not be an official church position. It was never a matter of whether or not the overwhelming numbers in the congregation supported civil rights. It was the role issue. And this issue had parallels within the Unitarian Universalist Association as well. In 1963, the General Assembly rejected a resolution that would have required congregations to drop racially discriminatory restrictions from their bylaws and adopted a resolution encouraging congregations to practice non-discrimination, as well as forming a commission on religion and race. In 1966, Martin Luther King delivered the Ware Lecture at General Assembly, and at that meeting, the Black Affairs Council of the UUA was formed. And in 1967, Black Unitarians for Radical Reform, BURR, B-U-R-R, but again, these organizations were within the UUA, but the UUA had not adopted an official position on black empowerment. In 1967 and 1968, UCE's Social Responsibility Committee was strongly involved in the Black Affairs Council, including the establishment of a black caucus within the UUA. I'm very pleased to say my parents were on that committee. The record is not clear on whether the congregation or board approved. However, a committee was formed to raise funds to support the Black Affairs Council. At this time, a new organization arose within the UUA. The Integrated Black and White Alternative, BAWA, was formed, whereas the Black Affairs Council was almost exclusively black. The UUA voted to provide financial support to the Black Affairs Council in the amount of $250,000 a year for each of 4 years and $50,000 to BAWA. All 7 UCE delegates voted yes, including my parents. However, after the first year, the UUA did not continue the promised funding, causing some black delegates to walk out of General Assembly. In addition, the relations between BAC and BAWA were not friendly. After a mediated return, a close vote funded BAC, but not BAWA. During this time here at UCE, Reverend Charles Edis led open housing marches with Pastor Jacob Blake of Ebenezer AME. Many UCE folks participated, culminating in a rally after MLK's assassination. UCE members continued to march with Reverend Edis for fair housing. Also in 1968, many black families took their children out of the Evanston schools in protest of Dr. King's assassination. Along with many other congregations, UCE opened its doors for an alternative school. Further, UCE congregants marched in a demonstration to ETHS to implement fair practices with black students under the leadership of Reverend Edis. Yet, there was still resistance to the church having an official position on social issues. A 1971 letter to the congregation from the Committee to Support the Black Affairs Council, asking for individual contributions to BAC. The letter explains the history of the 1968 General Assembly, voting to fund the $1 million over 4 years that wound up only being 1 year. So in response to that letter, in 2 years, only $450,000 have been raised. So BAC decided to forego UUA support and appeal directly to individual UUs. The next year, only $100,000 was raised, and BAC was urged to return to affiliation with the UUA. So as you can see, the challenge of black empowerment to UCE and the UUA caused a good amount of stress. But as time moved on, people all across the denomination became more comfortable with the idea of churches having official positions on issues. The best example of that is the Black Lives Matter sign along Ridge Boulevard. Plus, the UUA is taking stances on important social issues. At every General Assembly, for the last several years, we've had an action of immediate witness where attendees participate in a public protest. Also, annually, the UUA issues a statement of conscience on important issues after discussion and feedback from the congregations. Thus, the answer to the question, what should our role be, is to nurture the human spirit for a world made whole.
As we extinguish the chalice, please join in saying the words on the screen by the Reverend Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our final hymn is Lift Every Voice and Sing. This is also known as the Black National Anthem. James Weldon Johnson, a poet, lawyer, and principal of a segregated school in Jacksonville, Florida, wrote the lyrics in 1899 as Black citizens across the country were rapidly losing rights. The Supreme Court had recently ruled on Plessy versus Ferguson, mandating the separate but equal doctrine, and cities and states were codifying segregation in all aspects of life. The NAACP adopted the piece as its official song in 1919, and over the years since, it's been sung regularly at church ceremonies, school events, and family gatherings. Many years ago, I attended a lecture by Maya Angelou, and she reminisced about the Negro National Anthem, as she called it. Her school sang it each morning, as did many other segregated schools across the nation. The custom is to stand for Lift Every Voice, so please stand as you are able and enjoy singing this stirring music in honor of Black struggles and hopes throughout the years.
I hope the message that you heard in those stories was that it is our imperative, it is our call from our shared faith, our Unitarian Universalist tradition, to stand together, to speak out loud, to be in unison. It is not the job of any minister, it is not the job of any committee alone. It is all of us together to rise and stand in solidarity towards justice, for equity, compassion, and to make the world more whole and beautiful together. May we lift our voices in unison with conviction and clarity to sing the truth, to rise in solidarity, and to commit ourselves unequivocally to the causes of our faith and that our partnerships and relationships demand. May it be so. May we make it so. Amen.